Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. It's time for Friday Reads. My name is Angelia, and today I'm going to talk about the books that I finished this week and my continuing short story project for Shorty September, where I've been reading one short story by a different author every day this month. And I've been having a lot of fun with that. Before we get to the books of the week, I want to talk a little bit about the shows that we've been watching and a couple of things I did for Banned Books Week, which is just concluding today. So with the TV shows, I've talked about Reservation Dogs like every week for like 2 months, and I think there's a couple of episodes left in season 2, and this show is just so good. And once again, I'm going to implore everybody to watch it if they have not. It is just really good. It's sad, it's funny. You just get really invested in the people that live in this little town in Oklahoma. And this particular episode was about Willie Jack going to see Daniel's mother in jail. It was really good. All right, and then also the British Baking Show has started, and we watched the first episode. There should be a second one out today. So the first episode was good. It didn't really, the way it concluded with who was the star baker and who left was not really surprising based on what happened, but we enjoyed it. And then we're also in season 2 now of Better Call Saul. So we're enjoying all those programs. Banned Books Week was this week, and I feel like I kind of live in a banned books life because I read a lot of them all the time anyway. But to specifically celebrate Banned Books Week, I did attend 2 sessions at my public library. I found that they have a banned books club, which is a year-round, once-a-month club, but they had a couple of meetings this week. They kind of amped it up or something. But so I had not been there, because we just moved here, and I recently joined this library, and I've got major introvert non-energy, so going out and joining different things is kind of I have to motivate myself. But Stephen and I both went to the first session, which was about the Great Gatsby, and it was a really small group. I felt kind of bad because I did see, I don't know how many people saw the publicity, but they had they had posters up in the library, and it went out on their Facebook page, and I don't know how else they promoted it, but it was really, there was 3 library employees that are in this club, and then there was a couple, there was us, and maybe might have been somebody else from the public, and then there was a few people virtual. So they had, it was kind of it was a hybrid meeting, and we both went. I've read the book more recently. Stephen hadn't read it for like a million years ago back in school, but and I kind of looked through it, but I guess I read it maybe 3 or 4 years ago was the most recent time, because it really is one of my favorite books. So that was really fun. And then the next day was To Kill a Mockingbird, which I have not read since back in high school, and I know it's a greatly beloved American classic, but it's not really my favorite book, and I don't really think it's the best representation of its themes and topics. But I didn't go into all that. I did not go to the meeting as a stranger and make a lecture about the white savior trope or anything like that. But I did go back for that one. Stephen read the graphic novel version of it in between the 2 meetings to refresh his memory, but he decided not to go to the meeting. But that was kind of interesting that and we did talk in the meeting about how many of the classics now do have graphic novel adaptations, and how they do make it more accessible maybe to some people who are put off by the length or the style, or just a trepidation that a classic is going to be hard to read. So we agreed that it wasn't the same reading experience, but that it was a great avenue for readers to have that choice. So anyway, that was fun. We had a lot of good discussion about the recent climate of book bannings and challenges in Texas, where we live. So I did enjoy that, and I am going to continue. Next month they're discussing Frankenstein. And I found out, I kind of wondered, I saw the list of what they were going to read, and it was all classics and not really the more recent challenged books. And I found out that's because they were deliberately selecting books that were widely available in library copies, that they have multiple copies throughout the branches. So some of these very recent books, they might only have one or two copies in the system, and they wanted the club to be accessible for everyone to join without having to purchase a book. So that was why they weren't trying to shy away from the more recent controversies. And we did discuss some of those and some of those books and their availability. So that was fun. And then I did do a lot of great reading this week too. So let me talk about the actual what was read in this Friday Reads. So the first book was, I was almost at the end of this last week. I got some more space over there. Last week when I did Friday Reads, I think I was kind of near the end of Night of the Living Res, and I really loved this collection of interconnected short stories. And I talked about it kind of at length last week, but just a quick recap is it's interconnected stories that all feature David. And David is a member of the Penobscot tribe in Maine on a reservation, and it is about different things that happen in his life from childhood through adulthood, but it's not presented sequentially. So the different stories take place at different times, but they're not chronological. So one story he might be 10, and then the next story he might be in his 20s, and the next story he's a teenager. So I thought it'd be kind of, if I ever reread it, it might be kind of interesting to try to pick through and read them in chronological order instead of book order and see if that makes a difference in the reading experience. But because Morgan Talty, the author, did not present it chronologically, that was also really an interesting thing, because as a reader, you sometimes knew some background or what had happened before or what would happen next that David doesn't know about at the time, and it kind of added another layer of poignancy to the story. And these stories are, the conditions are harsh because the people are impoverished, and they have a lot of trauma, substance problems, mental health problems, but it's also very funny. There's a warmth and a humor that ties it all together that's really, really makes you bond and care about the people within his friends and family who reappear again and again throughout the stories. So I really loved this collection of stories, Night of the Living Res, and I'm kind of bummed out that it did not make the National Book Award long list. But I have not read all the books on this. I've only read like one book on that list, so I can't really say, oh, well, this should be here instead of that. But I feel like if they, I don't know, it feels like something that it should have happened, but they didn't ask me. All right, so then I took a sharp turn back into the past, and I read Strong Poison by Dorothy Sayers, which was published in 1930. So this is kind of a classic Lord Peter Wimsey mystery. So I had not read one of these Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries before, and my understanding was, because I had purchased a copy of Gaudy Night. I had heard that was good, but then I found out I needed to backtrack and read a couple of books before that to understand the character Harriet that's introduced in Strong Poison. So that I thought, okay, I'll start there. And I enjoyed this book. I liked it, but there was some things I liked, and there's a couple of things that were problematic to me. So Harriet, at the beginning of the story, Harriet Vane is in prison and on trial she is accused of murdering her boyfriend. And the story that we hear was that she had this boyfriend who, they were both writers. She's a successful mystery writer, and he is a less successful writer. And they lived together, which was pretty scandalous at that time. but he had pressured her into this living arrangement, saying he did not believe in marriage, and it was, this kind of free love situation. So at first, she did not want to live with him without being married, but then she eventually acquiesced to it. And then after they were living together, he announced that, well, actually, he did want to get married. And he felt this pressure from his background as the son of a vicar, I think. And then that made her mad, though. Like, rather than saying, "Oh, good, let's get married," she felt like he had kind of bullied her into compromising her values, just to make a point. And then now that he had won that battle, now he actually was okay with getting married. So she kind of felt like if that really was his value system, that marriage was not necessary. She had kind of come to accept that, but the fact that he didn't really believe that and he just wanted to win this battle of wills pissed her off, and so she dumped him. And so this will make a kind of a long backstory here, but this is all like right in the beginning. So anyway, he dies of arsenic poisoning, and there's a whole long train of things about these times that he was ill and then he died. And she is the main suspect because she had gone around and purchased arsenic, which she explained was because she wrote a murder mystery about somebody who used it as the murder weapon, and she wanted to research that it was very easy to just go and buy it at a pharmacy. So it doesn't look good for Harriet, but Lord Peter Wimsey is watching this trial, and he decides that he believes that she is not guilty and that he's going to take up the case because it ends in a mistrial, and so there's going to be a new trial. And in the intervening month, he's going to try to find out what really happened. Okay, so all this is like in the very beginning, the first couple chapters, so this is not any kind of spoilers. So the story is about him trying to find out. But all right, so this brings me to my first problem. So the mystery itself is fine. It's pretty good. It's entertaining. And there's a lot of humor and banter and things like that I liked. But he decides that he doesn't just decide that he feels like she is believable. He is very attracted to her. And he goes to visit her in jail and it tells her, "Hey, you know what? I believe you and I'm going to take this case and I'm going to get you off the hook. And then I want to marry you." This is when the first time he meets her, and she's just kind of like, "Oh, well, I don't know about that." And then they have this, witty repartee, and she doesn't really seem like a person in dire straits. Like, she's in jail, but she's, able to like flirt and make all these witty remarks. And so I had a problem with this. I thought this would not play at all in today's climate, that a man would go to a woman in jail and say, "Hey, I think I can save you from the gallows. And but while you're here stuck in jail, I'm gonna hit on you every time I come to visit until you finally, agree that I am somebody worth considering." I was like, that, I don't know, that didn't sit well. Like, what if he went to the trial and she was not at all attractive to him? Or, but would he still take the case? Or is it just because he, feels bad because he wants to have a shot at dating her or whatever? So anyway, that I had a hard time getting past that because it kept coming up every time he went to visit her. But other than that, so then the story goes along, and really the two best characters in the story are women. The two women that work for Peter Wimsey, who do all the investigations, Miss Murchison and Miss Clemson. Especially the best parts in the whole book are Miss Clemson doing the fake seances. Those are absolute comic gold. And so the rest of the book I did enjoy. The only other thing I did not like was there was a part where there's another side character who makes a couple of anti-Semitic jokes that, I'm just reading along and all of a sudden he says something and I'm just like, ugh, what? And then, everybody just keeps on going like it was just par for the course. And I was like, well, that's super outdated and not okay. So I don't know if every Lord Peter Wimsey book is similarly riddled with inappropriate things that were not inappropriate when they came out, but buyer beware. So my overall impression was that it was kind of a fun, very frothy mystery, but it had some dated material that was a little problematic. All right, so then what I am reading right now, I am reading Stephen King's new book, Fairy Tale. And so far, it is excellent. It is, thus far, and you know, things can take all kinds of twists and turns in a Stephen King novel, but thus far it is not a horror book. It starts out kind of a mystery. It is now started to move into fantasy, but you know it's going to be fantasy from the beginning, because the premise is that a teenage boy named Charlie, a series of things happen in Charlie's personal life that lead him to take on a job of helping a weird reclusive neighbor, Mr. Bowditch, when he has an accident and breaks his leg. And they end up bonding, and he also falls in love with Mr. Bowditch's German Shepherd, Radar. Now, I will say, I was nervous at the beginning of the story about Radar, because she comes into the story as an elderly dog who's gray and developing arthritis, and I thought, oh no, it's a Stephen King book, first of all, and then the dog is old, and I was like, but so far things are going well. I will tell you, after I read the book, I will tell you if there's a trigger warning about dogs. But so far, so good. And Radar is an important character in the story. And anyway, so Mr. Bowditch has a big old house, lots of secrets, which Charlie slowly begins to learn as Mr. Bowditch grows to trust him. But there is a shed in the backyard that is all locked up. And every now and then there's a creepy banging around and weird noises coming from there. And Charlie does not find out until Mr. Bowditch, no, I'm not going to tell you. I'm on page 177, and I have just found out in the previous chapter what's in the shed. I do like the structure of this book. Each chapter, let me show you a sample one. Each chapter begins with an illustration. There's two different illustrators. One illustrated the even pages and one the odd pages. There's illustration, and then the little kind of like serial style description of what will be happening in that chapter. And every chapter does end with a little foreshadowing or a teeny cliffhanger. So it's almost like a serial format, except thank goodness I get the whole thing at my own pace, because I have gobbled up the first 177 pages so far. And I think I've started this on Wednesday, and I haven't even read any today. So I will not be reading at a slow pace through this book, because it's very suspenseful. There's a lot going on, really interesting characters, really good storytelling. So I'm excited, because a good Stephen King can be really, really good. You know, a bad one can be a horrendous clunker, but so far this one is really good. So I will keep you posted on how that turns out as I read along. All right, I think that is it. This coming week will be the last week, I guess, of September. So it'll be my last week of the short story project. Oh, wait, I didn't talk about the short stories yet, did I? Oh, video is going to be, okay, I'm going to try to speed talk about the short stories, so this video is not 9 million miles long. But I did read 7 short stories of very, very, very varied variety. Various. They're wide-ranging in time, in the genre, and everything else. I can't believe I almost forgot the Shorty September. All right. So the first one I read was from this lovely volume of collected stories by Eudora Welty. And I read The Petrified Man, which was published in 1939. And it is, I don't know what this story is really about. There are some ladies sitting in a beauty parlor gossiping, and they talk about, you know, there's a piece of gossip that gets out about someone's pregnancy. There's a gossip about a lady that's come to town, and then there's gossip about what they saw at the circus sideshow, which includes the petrified man, and then something that gets revealed about his true identity. It's funny, it's weird, it's quirky. I'm sure that there's all this, symbolism and stuff if you had to read it for an English class, but I just read it for fun and laughed, and I don't really have a lot to say about it. It's just an oddball Eudora Welty story. Then my next one was from Ted Chiang's book Exhalation, and I read the title story, and these are science fiction stories, and I had not read any of Ted Chiang, and this book was published in 2019, and I've been hearing about it, and I wasn't sure what to expect. And I'd say Exhalation, it was a pretty fascinating story. I don't know that I'm going to sit and read the rest of this book because it's science fiction, but it's very philosophical. It's not, they're not adventure stories. They're not speculative fiction, really. They're sort of philosophical, scientific. It's not quite for me, but they're pretty interesting. So this story, Exhalation, is about a scientist who's not a human. You kind of gather this at the beginning of the story because he's talking about how in his society, people breathe with these oxygen lung tanks, and they have to change out their lung tanks every so often. And he discovers an anomaly in his society, and when he begins to investigate it, he accidentally finds out about the destiny of his world. He's trying to solve one thing, but stumbles onto something a lot bigger. And there's a long part of the story where he's dissecting his own head because the people are mechanical. So using mirrors and special tools, he's taking apart the panels, and he's trying to find out how memory is preserved and all this stuff that was just a teeny bit above my entertainment level, but I did enjoy the story. It was very unusual. I'm glad that I read something by Ted Chiang. I'm not sure it's my cup of tea to keep reading, but I'm glad I read it. Then I went to an older story that I have read before, and it's from this collection, Leaf Storm by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which was published in 1972. And I read the story, The Handsomest Drowned Man in the World. And there's a subtitle on that story that says, A Tale for Children. It is not a tale for children, but it is kind of a fable. And I guess that's why he used that subtitle. And in this story, in fact, at the very beginning of the story, a dead man washes up on shore and the children play with him like he's a toy before they finally get around to telling the adults that there is a dead man. And he's enormous. He's like taller than anyone's ever seen. And they bring him to the village and they lay him out to prepare him for burial. And he's apparently incredibly beautiful, and the women are mesmerized. And his presence changes the village in a positive way forever. It is definitely the weirdest story of the ones that I read this week, which is saying something based on the one I just talked about before. But it's really beautiful and really strange. And it just reminded me that I haven't read anything by Gabriel Garcia Marquez in a long time. And there really are some other wonderful stories in this book as well. The next day, I read a James Joyce story. This is Dubliners. You can't really see because there's no book jacket, but this is his collection, Dubliners, which was published in 1914. And in my memory, I was thinking, I'm going to go back and read that story, The Dead. But The Dead is like 50 pages long, so it didn't really fit into my daily read. So instead, I read Arabi. And Arabi's very short, just 3 or 4 pages. And it is a story about a boy who seems to be about 12 or 13, because he's at the age where he's still playing outside and being called in for dinner, but he's infatuated with his friend's sister, who's a little bit older. And she mentions something about this marketplace, this bazaar called Arabi. And in an impetuous moment, he says, well, I'll go there and I'll get you something, because he's just kind of in love with this girl who doesn't really notice him. And so it's a very short story about him wanting to go to this bazaar and having to wait and wait and wait for his uncle to get home and give him some money, and how he doesn't get there till it's almost closed. So it's really it's a little slice of a mood piece about just that kind of burning infatuation and love that you feel for someone who you want to notice you, and just I don't know. I don't want to say anything else about it because maybe you will read it. But it did remind me that this whole project has brought back to my memory a number of stories that I'm not reading for this month because they're longer stories. And so now I know that I need to bring those back and maybe every week read a couple of short stories. Not one every day necessarily, but one or two a week so that I can hit some of these longer ones that I want to read again. All right, then let's see, consulting my notes. I then moved up to more modern times and read a story from Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri. This book won the Pulitzer Prize and it was published in 1999. And I have a couple of her short story collections, and I've also read, I know I read The Namesake, and I don't know what else, if I read any other books, but I know I've read this one and the other one I have over there, which I can't see, the Unaccustomed Earth. But I read the first story in this collection, A Temporary Matter, which I have read before. It's a beautiful short story. I can see how this is probably one that people probably read in creative writing classes because it's just such a perfect little story about a couple. It's a really sad story. There's a couple who have fallen into a certain pattern of life after losing a child to a stillbirth. And they have fallen into this pattern of coexistence where they go through their daily routines without a whole lot of interaction. And there is some work being done in their neighborhood where the power is going to be out every night for like a week. And so they have to change up their pattern, and it gets them to start talking to each other again. And that's all I want to tell you about this story, because it's just like the writing is beautiful and it's just kind of devastating and quiet. So that is from Interpreter of Maladies, and the story's title was A Temporary Matter. And then the last one, because I have not read today's, maybe I only have 6 because I haven't read one today yet, but the last one is When in the Dordania by Lily King, which is in this collection, 5 Tuesdays in Winter. This is the newest book that I looked at. This is a 2021 book, and this is one of those rare short story collections where I loved the whole book. Night of the Living Rez is another one. Usually with a collection of short stories, I love a few, I like a few, and a couple of them I'm like, eh. But this one was a home run, and I remembered that my favorite story was, and I had to look up the pronunciation of, I keep having to look it up, Dordogne, which is a region in France, in a river in France. And When in the Dordogne is a story that is set in the 1980s, and it's about a teenage boy whose parents, he is the 4th child, he's the surprise child. He has 3 grown siblings, and then he came along when his parents were in their 40s and 50s. And so they're kind of standoffish. He's obviously wealthy, and they're very kind of formal and stuffy and not very close. But they go away. His parents, and we find out that his father has had a series of mental health breakdowns. So they are going to France for 8 weeks, and they hire 2 college boys from the nearby university to come and house sit and stay with him while they are on this vacation to the Dordogne. And it is just a wonderful story about his summer time with these 2 young men and the things that happen, what they bring to his life at that critical moment. It's just those 3 characters, and then also this girl that he is in love with kind of comes into the story a little bit. But it is just a wonderful slice of life. Again, a perfect little story. This one is not a sad story, even though it has a couple of emotional little tidbits in it. But anyway, I love that story. I highly recommend this collection. All right, that's it. I'm going to stop there. I will be back with more novels and short stories next week on Friday, and I will put something out on Tuesday as well. I'm kind of looking at, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'm going to look at maybe a fun tag video or something. I'm not sure. But something's coming. We'll see what it is. I hope that you've had a great week. Let me know what you think about any of these things that I read or what you are reading that I should know about. And I will talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye.